Picture a young heiress with a famous last name, born into unimaginable wealth. She has everything the world could possibly offer: a boundless trust fund, a family name that opens every door, and a future seemingly paved with gold. But behind the scenes, her life unfolds like a film noir, complete with courtroom dramas, manipulative caretakers, tragic romances, and heartbreak that repeats itself again and again. This is Gloria Vanderbilt's story, a saga that plays out on the grand stage of high society in Hollywood, but that also spins down dark, twisting corridors of secrecy and betrayal. By the end, it's clear that Gloria's real inheritance wasn't just money or prestige. It was a lifetime of scandal, survival, and self-discovery. From the moment she was born on February 20th, 1924, Gloria Vanderbilt's story was set apart from ordinary existence. Her father, Reginald "Reggie" Vanderbilt, was a railroad magnate of staggering wealth, his fortune tracing back to the family's Gilded Age empire. He adored his baby girl from the first moment he saw her, proudly noting how Vanderbilt she looks, with a sparkle in his eye. By some accounts, he all but worshipped her, cradling her close and fussing over the way her little features reminded him of the Vanderbilt legacy. It was a warm, if fleeting, glow. Gloria's father died of cirrhosis of the liver when she was only 18 months old, leaving behind a gaping void in her life and a vast inheritance in her name. That's how Gloria started her journey, the baby of a doomed father, thrust into an existence none of us can truly fathom. As if losing her dad weren't enough for a toddler to handle, her mother, Gloria Morgan Vanderbilt, was hardly suited to fill the void. She was just 21, dazzlingly beautiful, and more interested in high society parties and romantic adventures than in the day-to-day demands of motherhood. The money, however, was definitely on her mind. Gloria was now a millionairess many times over, which made her mother, who was in control of that trust, more or less free to spend with abandon. And spend she did. For baby Gloria, that meant a childhood shaped by neglect and confusion. Her mother used the fortune for her own escapades, traveling, hosting wild parties, and leaving the child mostly in the care of an Irish nurse named Dodo. In her memoir, Gloria later wrote that she was handed straight into Dodo's arms, bypassing the usual maternal bonding that might have happened with her mother. Dodo became her true emotional anchor, the one who cradled her at night and sang her lullabies. While her mother flitted around the globe, Gloria found a semblance of love and stability from this devoted nanny. But in the gilded realm of the Vanderbilts, no caregiver's job was ever secure. If the mother was displeased, a nanny might vanish overnight, leaving the child bereft. Realizing this shaky ground, Dodo made a bold move. Fearing she'd be fired and knowing Gloria would be left with no one, she snuck the little girl away to Aunt Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, one of the formidable matriarchs of the Vanderbilt clan. Aunt Gertrude was wealthy in her own right, a patron of the arts, and something of a firecracker. She was watching from the sidelines, more and more disturbed by how her young niece was being raised. With Gloria now momentarily in her care, Gertrude decided enough was enough and sued for custody, igniting what the media would soon call the trial of the century. Everyone from average American newspaper readers to the most rarefied members of high society became enthralled by the drama. It had all the perfect ingredients: an innocent child heir, a questionable mother with a rumored taste for debauched parties, a wealthy aunt who might or might not have her own agendas, and, of course, the Vanderbilt money at the heart of the controversy. The press wasted no time digging up every sordid detail they could about Gloria's mother. They alleged that she left explicit photos lying around the house, that she introduced baby Gloria to adult cocktail making, and that she spent extravagantly on lovers while ignoring her daughter. The newspapers were merciless. Aunt Gertrude's legal team hammered away, exposing not just typical parenting lapses, but painting a picture of a scandal-soaked mother unfit to raise her child. Headlines screamed about the enormous trust fund Gloria stood to inherit, and the American public ate it all up, fueling endless speculation over what kind of environment the little heiress had endured. Things reached a fever pitch when a French maid named Maria Caillaux took the stand, claiming she had witnessed Gloria's mother in bed with Lady Nada Milford Haven, a suggestion that there was a lesbian affair going on under the same roof as the toddler. This was explosive for the time, enough to cause an uproar in the courtroom so loud that the judge had to close the proceedings to the public. And it wasn't just a one-off. Each new day brought a fresh, salacious detail that threatened to overshadow everything else. Little Gloria herself was shuttled in and out of court under the glare of camera flashes. She was asked private questions about her home life, her mother's behavior, and whether she even liked living with her mother. Under intense pressure, in secret interviews with the judge, she tearfully admitted that she felt lonely around her mother and actually preferred being with Aunt Gertrude. That confession likely sealed the deal. Custody was granted to the aunt. By the time the verdict was announced, Gloria was the world's most famous child, literally a front-page tabloid sensation. For the rest of her life, she would remember it as a time of deep betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak. She admitted years later that Aunt Gertrude had coached her on exactly what to say, urging her to emphasize her mother's neglect. It wasn't that her mother was a model parent, far from it, but the entire fiasco left Gloria psychologically scarred. She came away with the sense that nearly every adult in her orbit had used her as a pawn in some grand feud. The only saving grace was that she was finally out of her mother's direct care. Yet that didn't guarantee an idyllic childhood in Aunt Gertrude's domain. At Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney's estate, Gloria lived in a luxurious environment that might have dazzled anyone else. But for a child who craved warmth and emotional security, it was as cold as a museum. Gertrude had a controlling personality, demanding that Gloria conform to a rigid schedule. The rebellious streak in Gloria, which had always been subdued by others' dictates, began to awaken. She felt like a restless spirit trapped in a golden cage. She was sent to Miss Porter's school in Connecticut, the finishing academy for upper-class girls, and rubbed elbows with future luminaries such as Jacqueline Bouvier, later Jackie Kennedy. Yet behind the crisp uniforms and manicured lawns, teenage Gloria rebelled in her own ways, chiefly by exploring her sexual identity with a close female friend. The friend reminded her of her old nanny Dodo, which gave the experience a strange emotional resonance. Gloria would later describe it with a frankness that stunned interviewers. She was discovering who she was, but the ghosts of her childhood cast long shadows over her desires. By her late teens, she'd had enough of Aunt Gertrude's stranglehold. Hollywood beckoned with its promises of freedom and excitement. Gloria reunited with her mother in Beverly Hills, an ironic twist, given everything that had happened in the custody battle. But at 17, freedom from one controlling adult is often worth risking another questionable caretaker. Suddenly thrust into the swirl of West Coast high society, Gloria found it thrilling to party with stars, attend glamorous soirees, and catch the eye of powerful men. She was gorgeous, slender, luminous, and carrying the Vanderbilt mystique. Men lined up for a chance to charm her, including the billionaire aviator and movie producer Howard Hughes. He was nearly 20 years older, but that didn't stop them from having a fling that left tongues wagging. Gloria's fascination with older, charismatic men was plain to see. And it wasn't just Hughes. Soon enough, she caught the attention of Pat DeChico, a Hollywood agent rumored to have mob connections. She was just 17 going on 18, while he was in his mid-30s. They married in 1941, and almost immediately, the teenage fairy tale turned into a nightmare. DeCicco was physically abusive, slamming Gloria's head against walls for minor infractions, mocking her body by calling her Fatsy Roo, and controlling her every move. At first she was isolated and terrified, but after 4 miserable years, she mustered the courage to break free, filing for divorce in 1945. Desperate for a sense of stability, she latched onto the next candidate, world-renowned conductor Leopold Stokowski, who was about 42 years older than she was. On the surface, this marriage, her second, seemed far more cultured than her first. With Stokowski, she had 2 sons, Leopold Stan Stokowski and Christopher Stokowski, and tried to rebrand herself as the sophisticated wife of a maestro. She hosted refined gatherings, studied classical music, and immersed herself in high art. But behind the polite facade, the controlling dynamic persisted. Stokowski discouraged her from forging her own social life, ensuring that she needed him for nearly everything. Frustrated and lonely, she eventually strayed, reportedly into an affair with none other than Frank Sinatra. By 1955, she divorced Stokowski, disillusioned with yet another husband who failed to give her the unconditional love she so desperately sought. Her third marriage was to the esteemed film director Sidney Lumet, known for classics like 12 Angry Men and Dog Day Afternoon. They wed in 1956, but this union also hit the rocks, culminating in a divorce in 1963. It's as though Gloria repeatedly chose men who either mirrored her father's absence or her mother's neglect, forever searching for someone to fill that bottomless emotional chasm. Each time, her illusions dissolved into heartbreak. Finally, in the same year she divorced Lumet, she married Wyatt Emery Cooper, a writer and actor her own age, and for the first time she found real happiness. He was kind, empathetic, and genuinely loved her for who she was. With Wyatt, Gloria had 2 more sons, Carter Vanderbilt Cooper and the future CNN anchor, Anderson Cooper. This marriage lasted 15 years, her longest by far, and Gloria often called Wyatt the love of her life, the only man who made her feel cherished and safe. Tragically, he died in 1978 at just 50 years old during open-heart surgery. The heartbreak of losing Wyatt was a wound she never fully healed from, referring to herself as Mrs. Cooper for the rest of her life and never remarrying. By then, Gloria was far from the naive teenager who had once fled from aunt to mother to various older lovers. She'd grown into a formidable figure in her own right, an artist, writer, socialite, and fashion mogul who introduced the world to designer jeans complete with her signature swan logo. The brand soared in popularity during the late 70s and 80s, making her a kind of style icon. She licensed her name to perfume lines, ventured into fine art, and authored a string of books, including candid memoirs detailing the Vanderbilt family's checkered past. In the process, she tried to move beyond the fiascos of her youth, though the burdens of her last name and the tragedy she'd endured kept surfacing, yet the worst was still to come. In 1988, Gloria's son Carter Cooper, then 23, came to visit her in her 14th floor Manhattan penthouse. Without warning, in a moment of unimaginable tragedy, he climbed onto the ledge and threatened to end his life. Gloria rushed to him, begged him to come inside, but he let go of the railing right in front of her eyes. She lived with that image seared into her memory. No heartbreak she'd experienced up to that point, her father's death, her mother's betrayal, the abusive marriages, even Wyatt's passing, could compare to witnessing her own child's final moments. For years afterward, she kept Carter's memory close, refusing to let society push her into silence. She told friends and journalists that she wanted people to speak his name, to remember him. She hated how the world often acts like a loved one who passes away never existed, and she wouldn't let that happen to Carter. In the decades that followed, Gloria spent much of her time nurturing her creative endeavors. Painting gave her a sense of solace, as did writing. She remained close to her son Anderson, who went on to become a leading news anchor at CNN. Despite her flamboyant presence and storied family name, Gloria was surprisingly shy. In interviews, she confessed that she was terrified of rejection, that she felt lonely and misunderstood for much of her life. Perhaps that's why, in her later years, she found the digital world refreshing. She discovered social media, starting an Instagram account in her 90s. She posted pictures of her artwork, whimsical photos of her daily life, and nostalgic memories, delighting in the interaction with thousands of new admirers. It was as if she'd finally found a way to connect intimately with people on her own terms. Gloria's relationship with her mother remained complicated to the end. Years had passed since that sensational custody trial, but the scars never fully faded. She told interviewers that she went 2 entire years in therapy without once mentioning her mother. Eventually, they formed a tentative detente. Gloria saw her mother as someone who couldn't cope and made a kind of peace with that. Still, she never forgot the sense of being a pawn, nor the confusion of being overshadowed by her mother's flamboyance and irresponsibility. For all the progress they might have made, she considered her mother more of a stranger than a close family figure, a symbol of all that had gone wrong in her early life. Another perennial point of curiosity: her finances. People would ask, is Gloria Vanderbilt still wealthy? She certainly did have a considerable estate, though she didn't plan to pass it on to her son Anderson Cooper as a trust fund. Cooper once remarked that his mother made it clear there would be no trust fund for him to lean on, and that was fine by him. He'd carved his own successful career. Gloria believed that wealth can be as much a curse as a blessing, something she knew from personal experience, having been the center of that swirling golden hurricane since birth. In June 2019, Gloria passed away at the age of 95, prompting an outpouring of tributes. Anderson Cooper choked up on live television, calling her the strongest person I've ever met and sharing how every time he said goodbye to her, she'd remind him that she loved him. Gloria's legacy spans far more than high society gossip or the iconic jeans that adorned many a stylish woman's closet in the 80s. She was a survivor who underwent harrowing custody battles, abusive marriages, financial betrayals, and searing personal losses. Yet she carried herself with a kind of kaleidoscopic flair. Painter, novelist, socialite, mother, and heartbreak survivor, all wrapped into one formidable persona. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Gloria's journey is how she channeled that heartbreak into art and open conversation. She refused to let tragedy define her, even as it shaped every nuance of her life. She reveled in love wherever she could find it, whether with Wyatt Cooper, her beloved nanny Dodo, or the swirl of new online friends in her final years, and never let the veneer of wealth quell her curiosity or her vulnerability. If anything, it made her more determined to own her own story, no matter how salacious or painful the details might be. Looking back, it's almost as though Gloria Vanderbilt's entire life was a rebellious act against the constraints imposed on her from childhood. Reggie Vanderbilt's precious baby girl turned tabloid fodder when she was barely old enough to understand the charges being lobbed in court, eventually grew into a woman who refused to stay quiet or retreat behind the high walls of inherited privilege. Instead, she stepped onto the public stage again and again, sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance, until she became a living testament to resilience. It's a narrative that reminds us how the most glamorous lives can hide the deepest wounds. Here was a child who lost her father almost before she knew him, who was neglected by her mother, manipulated by an aunt, exploited by older lovers, battered by a mob-linked first husband, controlled by a second, restless in her third marriage, and finally found bliss in her fourth, only to watch him die prematurely. And then the unimaginable, seeing her own child slip from her grasp in a final tragic moment. Yet despite all that, she pressed on, forging a career as a designer, artist, and writer, weaving her tragedies into a tapestry that by the end sparkled with the shine of hard-won wisdom. In many ways, Gloria Vanderbilt's life unspooled like a Hollywood script. Perhaps that's one reason she was so drawn to Tinseltown in her youth. But reality is rarely as neat or forgiving as the movies. She carried those scars with her until her final breath, though she did so with extraordinary grace. When Anderson Cooper tearfully eulogized his mother on CNN, calling her the strongest person I've ever met, he also captured the deeper truth. For all her fortunes, she grappled with heartbreaks most of us can hardly imagine. And still she smiled. She created, she loved, and she pressed forward with unstoppable verve. What emerges, then, is a portrait of an heiress whose billions couldn't shield her from heartache, but who lived and loved on her own terms. She redefined herself countless times. Society darling, teenage rebel, Hollywood wife, glamorous hostess, memoirist, style innovator, and, most of all, a woman committed to forging her own destiny. The final lesson might be that real wealth lies in how bravely you face your demons, how artfully you reshape your tragedies, and how generously you share your spirit with those around you. So yes, the name Vanderbilt still invokes images of opulent mansions, railroads that conquered a nation, and parties that redefined the meaning of luxury. But in the swirl of that legacy, Gloria Vanderbilt left behind something more personal and meaningful, a testament to resilience. Hers was a life lived on the edge of heartbreak and hope, revealing that true inheritance is about more than money. It's about the stories we carry, the scars we show, and the capacity to transform our darkest trials into something that glows with humanity. And in that sense, Gloria might just be the grandest Vanderbilt of them all.